Hey guys, tonight we're curling up beneath bear hides and reed mats, slipping into the frost-kissed world of the Ainu people, Japan's indigenous community, once cloaked in forests, firelight, and more than a few mysteries after dark. You're going to settle in beside a flickering hearth that never goes out, while the wind hisses through wooden planks, and someone just out of sight mumbles a prayer in a language you've never heard. If you're used to memory foam, central heating, and podcasts for sleep, well, you probably won't survive this. But that's okay. You're here to listen, not to hike through the snow barefoot to fetch firewood. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and the current time down below. I love seeing where, and when, you're all drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You nestle into the dim interior of an Ainu sais, a traditional thatched house built low and wide, like a sleepy tortoise hunched against the wind. It's night outside. The Hokkaido air is sharp enough to cut bread. You can smell pine smoke and the earth-packed walls. Inside, however, it's a different world. Woolen blankets, hand-stitched from traded materials, and bear pelts so thick they might as well be armored. The fire at the center of the home crackles low, a living creature in its own right. And tonight, like every night, sleep begins not in silence, but in the creak of bodies settling, the rustle of layered garments peeled away, and the first flickers of heat-warming skin gone cold from chores and ceremony. The Ainu didn't just go to bed. They arrived at sleep, like stepping into a sacred space. The hearth, called the Airori, wasn't just a heat source, it was a spiritual axis, where the domestic and the divine coexisted. Most slept on the floor, of course, but saying floor is misleading. You lie on mats layered with straw, reeds, maybe softened bark if someone's been resourceful. You get one blanket, if you're lucky. But if you're very lucky, you're given the honor of sharing a thick, warm bear pelt, one that might have been hunted in ritual months ago. A mainstream, historical fact. The Ainu revered bears as gods. And yet, they also hunted them. Raised them, even. A contradiction. Definitely. But that's what makes sleep here so layered, literally and spiritually. You curl closer to the fire and notice how the beds circle it, but not too close. There's an etiquette. Elders nest nearer to the flame, their joints creaking with age. Young ones are arranged like petals around them, smaller bodies tucked under shared cloth. Position matters. It reflects status, warmth, and who wakes up first to stir the coals. Here's a quirky tidbit. Many Ainu believed that spirits, kamui, liked warm spaces too. So yes, you might be sharing your sleeping area with an invisible guest or two. Don't worry. They're polite. Mostly. Outside, the snow sighs against the roof. Someone snores, an elder with lungs like a bagpipe, you suspect. No one complains. Snoring, in fact, is something of a badge of honor here. It means you're sleeping well, like the bear spirits intended. Some even say it scares away unwanted visitors from the mountains. Historians still argue whether the Ainu's layered sleep arrangements were purely practical or embedded with social codes that mirrored larger cosmological beliefs. Did the position around the fire reflect familial hierarchy, or was it about channeling the hearth's spiritual energy more efficiently? No consensus. But either way, you are, quite literally, warmed by myth. You shift a little. The mat crackles under your weight. From somewhere outside the sais comes a very non-mythical noise, an owl. Maybe. Or something larger. You don't check. The Ainu believed night animals carried messages from the spirit realm, and you've seen enough folklore to know better than to eavesdrop. As you drift, you feel the difference. This isn't sleep for escape or even rest. It's part of a cycle, a lived rhythm between nature, breath, and the silent consent of every living being around you. When one person shifts, everyone adjusts. When a baby fusses, a mother hums a tune passed down 5 generations. Even that's part of the ritual. And of course, the blanket is scratchy. The bear pelt smells faintly like smoke and wet fur. But somehow, these small discomforts lull you deeper. There's nothing artificial here. No blue light. No traffic. No subtle anxiety about tomorrow's alarm clock. Just the dark, the warmth, the slow creak of history settling into your bones. And maybe that's the strangest part of all, realizing that for the Ainu, sleep wasn't something separate from life. It was stitched right in, between the fire and the floor, the elder's breath and the soft tread of Kamui passing through dreams. You wake, or rather, you half-wake, to the sound of embers shifting. The hearth never truly dies. Ainu homes are not designed for deep, uninterrupted REM cycles. Instead, their nights unfold in segments. A nap here, a waking thought there, then a drift back under pelts before the moon shifts too far. This segmented sleep isn't a flaw. It's the design. You stretch quietly in your spot on the mat, and glance at the others. No one's alarmed to be awake. A mother nurses her child. Someone hums. Someone mutters a prayer to the fire. This is the rhythm of the night, not silence, but low murmurs and soft motion, like a lake under moonlight. Mainstream historians call this biphasic sleep. In agrarian and indigenous cultures, before electric lights smoothed the world into 8-hour sleep blocks, people often rose for an hour or two in the middle of the night. It was a quiet intermission, for reflection, prayer, storytelling, or even, in a few cheeky cases, visiting a neighbor's mat under cover of darkness. You sit up and rub your hands, watching your breath fog just slightly in the cooler air beyond the fire's reach. Someone tosses a log on the flames. Sparks leap up like fireflies trying to escape. Now, a little-known Ainu custom: midnight lullabies. Not sung to children, but to the fire itself. There are whispers that flames, like any other spirit, enjoy a good tune. Especially one with rhythm. There's a recorded chant that roughly translates to "warm my bones, forget my sins." Not a bad thing to murmur when your feet are frozen. You lean against a bundled mat and observe the house around you. The size isn't perfectly square. It's slightly oval, with a clear orientation. The hearth always sits to the east side of the house, which, symbolically, is where the spirits dwell. That means your head faces west. Symbolically, toward the human world. There's even evidence the Ainu believed sleep itself was a bridge between these two directions, a short spiritual commute, so to speak. Historians still argue whether this spiritual geography was standardized across villages, or just an old custom from a few prominent clans. The written record's patchy, mostly second-hand, and colonial documentation rarely bothered with dream architecture. But oral histories support the idea. Dreams weren't personal, after all. They were shared, like blankets and bear stew. Speaking of stew, you catch the scent now. Rich, meaty, bone-heavy. Leftover from the evening meal, but still hanging in the air like a comforting ghost. One pot for everyone, cooked low and long. Shared sleep, shared soup, shared breath. An elder stirs and begins a tale. You can't understand the words, but the cadence is unmistakable. It's not quite a bedtime story. It's more like a casual historical retelling, with a few mythic embellishments. Something about a fox tricking a snow god. Or maybe the other way around. The younger ones roll over to listen, wide-eyed. Some are pretending to sleep, but are clearly eavesdropping with intent. You shift under your pelt. You're not cold exactly, but there's a draft sneaking along the floor like a nosy cat. And you wonder how many generations have done exactly this. Woken in the dark, stared at the fire, and listened to the creak of a house built by hands long gone. A quirky detail, just for you. Ainu children were once taught to whistle indoors at night. Not for fun. To keep bad spirits confused. Apparently, Kamui are not fans of whistling. Go figure. Outside, something thuds on the roof. A branch? A raccoon dog? You don't check. One rule seems to dominate Ainu midnight logic. If it doesn't come inside, it's not your problem. You take a sip of water from a clay cup beside your mat. Cold. Flat. Clean. Somehow, perfect. And in this low hush of night's intermission, you feel it. How sleep among the Ainu isn't just a biological reset. It's a communal pause. A soft reboot. No one rushes you. No one says, "Go back to bed." You'll do that when the fire settles again and the house exhales. Sleep comes not as a command but as a suggestion, always hovering nearby, like steam above the stew pot. You yawn. The story's winding down. Someone coughs. Someone farts, softly, apologetically. No one reacts. The Kamui probably heard worse. And just as gently as you surfaced from sleep, you drift under again. Not because you must, but because you can. You wake again, later, or perhaps it's earlier. Time folds oddly in these nights. You're never sure how long you've been asleep, only that you were, and now you're not. Outside, there's the faintest gray leaking into the sky, but it's not morning yet. The world is paused, in that delicious space between dreams and demands. This time, you notice your body more. The woven rush mat beneath your hip, slightly uneven. The fur wrap over your shoulders, still radiating shared warmth. The distant crackle of the hearth, now more ember than flame. Someone has placed a split log nearby, ready to feed the fire without fully waking. A tiny detail, but it speaks volumes. Care, habit, continuity. You shift and peer toward the entrance of the sais. The doorway is low, deliberately so. Not a design flaw, but a spiritual barrier. Kamui, those Ainu spirits, don't like stooping. So, the lower the door, the less chance of something supernatural casually strolling in. Clever, right? And yes, you're still expected to duck your head every time you leave or enter, even if you're half asleep or groggy from dreams about talking bears who demand better soup seasoning. Which, fun fact, was actually the subject of one preserved Ainu folktale. The bear was offended by bland broth and cursed the entire village with weak ankles. Harsh, but memorable. You lie back and trace the latticework of the roof with your eyes. The beams intersect like a wooden constellation. Every home's pattern is slightly different, each notch made by hand, no nails, just carved joins. If you lived here long enough, you could probably navigate dreams using the rafters alone. That beam over there, it always looks like a sleepy eagle. The one in the corner, a fish, maybe. Depends on how tired you are. There's a low thud. Then another. It's not ominous, just rhythmic. You recognize it. Someone outside chopping firewood in the pre-dawn hush. Ainu mornings didn't always begin with dramatic sunrises. Sometimes they began with the sound of axe on log and the smell of fresh cedar. But here's a more unusual twist. Ainu people didn't just wake up and get to work. First, they greeted the kamui. Like roommates you respect. A soft prayer to the fire, a nod to the hearth goddess, sometimes even a short chant thanking the door spirit for protecting everyone through the night. Modern historians agree on this part. Spirituality wasn't a separate ritual, it infused everything. Waking up wasn't just a groggy stumble to the day. It was an act of connection. You might mumble a line of gratitude for dreams, another for the weather, and one for whoever remembered to put out extra dried salmon the night before. You yawn, stretch, and sit up. The others are stirring now, too. Not all at once, but in waves. A child sneezes. An elder coughs politely. Someone grumbles about a sore back, though you suspect this is less of a complaint and more of a declaration of age-earned wisdom. Like, my back hurts, therefore I know things. You shuffle to the fire, which is now just a nest of glowing embers. Someone adds that split log. The flame reawakens like it, too, just remembered it had responsibilities. There's a pan placed over it now, heating leftover stew. Same soup, different day. Thick with root vegetables, game meat, and sometimes, inexplicably, seaweed. Historians still argue whether the seaweed in inland villages was a trade luxury or just foraged from river shallows. And yes, this is breakfast. No sugary pastries or caffeine jolts. Just warmth, salt, and sustenance. The kind of food that anchors you before a day of walking in snow or gathering reeds or, let's be honest, herding kids. There's a routine to all of it. You clean your face with cold water from a wooden ladle. You fold your bedding neatly. Well, you try. One of the younger ones shows you how to do it without offending any household spirits. Turns out, folding from left to right is for guests, right to left is for family. You get it wrong twice. No one corrects you. They just subtly redo it while you're not looking. Now, something strange and wonderful. The morning silence isn't silent. There are songs. Soft, half-spoken work songs that don't rise above a murmur. Some are instructions, pull the bark gently, or don't step on the fox's trail. Others are laments for ancestors, sung not out of grief but as greetings. And sometimes, they're jokes. Yes, melodic jokes. A favorite, you snore like a bear who lost his flute. You try not to take that one personally. Outside, the air is sharp. You duck through the door and feel the bite of dawn. Snow crunches underfoot. A line of smoke trails upward. In the distance, someone's calling to a dog, or possibly arguing with it. A string of dried fish sways from a pole, and you remember a detail from earlier. Those fish are technically part of the household protection spell. So, don't touch. Just admire. You realize the rhythm of Ainu mornings isn't one of urgency. No bells. No shouted orders. Just movement. Quiet, deliberate, cooperative. If something doesn't get done right away, it will later. No one seems terribly worried. And that's the secret, maybe. Sleep wasn't treated as a reset button, something to squeeze into a rigid 8-hour block. It flowed into waking, and waking flowed into it. There was no hard edge between night and day, just a shifting of light, temperature, and intention. You close your eyes one last time before the day properly begins. Just a moment. Just to savor the space between. The sun finally nudges its way up, though it's a soft, filtered sort of light. Nothing dramatic, no blazing rays cutting through the mist like a samurai sword. Just a gentle glow seeping over the treetops, brushing the snow with a golden fuzz that's almost too delicate to notice unless you're standing very still, which you are, because you've been instructed not to rush your first breath of morning air. Yep, that's a thing. According to Ainu custom, the first inhale of the day should be taken deliberately. Not because the air's rare or infused with herbs or anything like that, but because it's new. Untouched. Like you're the first one greeting the morning. There's a quiet reverence to it, and you find yourself drawing in a lungful of cold air, holding it a second longer than usual, then exhaling slowly, like you're letting go of whatever nonsense followed you from your dreams. Around you, the household has fully stirred. Some members slip into their daily routines almost wordlessly, others exchange brief glances or mutterings in that soft Ainu cadence, full of lilts and elongated vowels. It's musical, even when people are just asking where the bone needles went. You step out of the seize, careful not to bump your head, and the chill sharpens your senses. Children run past, barefoot somehow, even in the frost. You blink and suppress a shiver. One of them turns and shouts a teasing phrase over their shoulder, something about soft outsider feet. You pretend not to hear it. Let's talk about what you're wearing. You've layered up in atus, a robe made from inner tree bark, often elm. Sounds itchy, right? It's not. It's been pounded soft and woven with immense care. Some robes even carry embroidered patterns along the cuffs and hems, intricate motifs believed to protect the wearer from evil spirits or, at the very least, mild colds. The color, kind of a natural tan, maybe a bit charcoal at the seams. Stylish in a forest minimalist sort of way. And because it's morning, and because this is still technically a time of transition from dream to duty, many of the elders begin chanting Kamui-yukur, mythic tales passed down for generations. They're not reserved for bedtime, surprisingly. These stories can arrive at any hour, like an impromptu podcast that just starts playing from someone's throat. One tale involves a fox spirit that fell asleep for an entire winter and woke up thinking he'd been promoted to moon god. The punchline: he started giving people unsolicited advice on when to plant millet. They listened, of course, because you never ignore a talking fox, no matter how sleepy he looks. You sit with one of the elders. Let's call her Etakana. She has the softest voice, like moss covered in snow, and when she tells a story, her hands dance with the rhythm of it. You don't interrupt. You just watch, listen, and try to catch the breath of the story between her pauses. Etakana describes how the Ainu didn't separate sleep from storytelling. In fact, the two were often partners. You'd fall asleep to one tale and wake to its continuation, or, if you were unlucky, its moral lesson. You ask if people ever got annoyed at cliffhangers. She smiles and says, "Only the impatient." She shows you the Kamui-yukur drum, a small, flat, palm-held thing. It's more for rhythm than melody. Each beat helps carry the words forward like a canoe over slow water. The stories themselves, not always exciting. In fact, many are gloriously dull. A famous one details, in painful specificity, how the bear god taught humans to store acorns. Historians still argue whether the acorn thing is metaphor or dietary advice. Probably both. Possibly neither. Then, breakfast again. Or, really, the third breakfast, depending on how early you woke. The Ainu didn't strictly stick to 3 meals a day. Instead, they followed the rhythm of labor and light. Hungry now. Eat now. Not hungry. Store some dried trout in your sleeve for later. That's not a joke. Sleeves were multipurpose. As the day stretches on, you notice how much attention is paid to the sleeping spaces. Yes, even during daylight. Blankets are folded precisely. Headrests, usually carved wooden blocks, are checked for cracks. No one plops onto bedding casually. The sleeping area is sacred, even when unoccupied. One of the younger kids lets you in on a secret. If you dream of an owl, you have to share the dream before lunch. Otherwise, the owl gets annoyed and your next nap will be full of confusing symbols. Like what? You ask. Mostly fish arguing about taxes, he replies. You make a mental note to keep your dreams chatty and punctual. A woman brushes herbs over the sleeping mats, something fragrant and dry, maybe a kind of mugwort. It's not about cleaning, exactly. More like refreshing the spirit of the bedding. You watch her work, each motion slow and deliberate. She hums as she goes, a tune you don't recognize, but that feels ancient, like it belongs to the fabric of the seice itself. There's no rush. Not in movement, not in speech. Even as the sun climbs higher and chores hum along, there's space between moments. And in that space, you realize, sleep isn't something the Ainu escape to. It's something they invite in, treat with dignity, and, occasionally, light sarcasm. Like when one of the hunters returns from checking his traps and announces, "If I were a fox, I'd still be asleep." Smarter than us. He's met with nods. Someone offers him soup. Someone else calls him lazy. All in good fun. You close your eyes, just briefly, listening to the crackling fire, the faint rhythm of distant chanting, the murmur of people preparing food or carving tools or whispering dreams. The day's fully begun, but sleep, you sense, never fully left. The light outside shifts again. Not darker, not quite, but less sharp, more diffused. It has that late afternoon hush to it, when even the trees seem to yawn. You've wandered beyond the village's main cluster now, down a narrow path worn smooth by many bare feet and many years. The trees overhead form a cozy green tunnel, their branches locking fingers. This is where the Ainu sometimes go to nap. Not just to sleep, but to nap. Under the open sky, amid the rustling ferns and mossy stones. It's a kind of luxury, and not everyone indulges daily. But when they do, it's serious business. There's no collapsing into a hammock and doom-scrolling a birch bark scroll. No. This is purposeful napping, with intention. One elder jokingly calls it temporary death to file spiritual paperwork. You lay on a mat rolled out beside a tree that looks about 300 years old, though the tree refuses to comment. The forest smells of damp earth, sweet pine resin, and something musky that might be wild mushrooms or just the faint presence of a nearby bear. You hope for mushrooms. The Ainu don't nap like you do. There's no curling into a fetal position, no burrowing under weighted blankets. Instead, you lie flat, facing up, eyes gently closed. Hands rest on your stomach, or sometimes palms up at your sides. It's meant to be like a corpse. Yep, you heard that right. The idea is to imitate stillness so completely that your spirit feels safe enough to step outside and go exploring. This practice, called Ramat Nuker, literally means soul watching. You're not supposed to snore. You're supposed to listen. Not with your ears, but with that squishy, mystical inner part of yourself that doesn't have a name but knows exactly when someone is staring at you from across the room. You know the one. As you rest, you become aware of everything. The soft pop of a twig breaking in the distance. The way the wind combs through leaves in layers. The occasional clatter of a squirrel digging up an emergency snack. It's all part of the lullaby. The Ainu believe that sleep opens a bridge, not just to dreams, but to places beyond understanding. Some say their ancestors visit them during these naps. Others believe the gods come to check if you're still grateful for your rice. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were metaphysical doctrines or simply poetic metaphors for daydreaming. Either way, they make your nap feel more majestic. Then, a strange moment, a bee buzzes low across your ear. You don't flinch. You don't move. Because someone told you earlier that sudden movement during soul watching might confuse your spirit. It might come back to the wrong body part and give you a twitchy leg for the rest of the day. You don't want a twitchy leg. No one wants that. Eventually, the nap ends, not because a clock tells you so, but because the wind changes. Subtle but definite. Cooler now. Shadows stretching. You sit up slowly, blinking at the trees like they've rearranged themselves in your absence. Maybe they have. Back in the village, people are already preparing for the evening. Fish has been smoked, again. Some kind of root vegetable stew bubbles over a fire, smelling faintly like licorice and regret. You help carry firewood, because you feel weird about napping all afternoon while everyone else did productive things like exist. As you stack logs beside a cooking pot, a younger boy comes up and pokes you in the side. "Did your soul tell you anything useful?" he asks, not unkindly. You think about it. "It told me I should always stretch before standing up." He nods like that's profound. Now, with dusk brushing against the horizon, the attention returns to sleep, but in a different form. Tonight will be a special night. Not a festival, exactly, but a communal storytelling circle. People gather around the hearth, feet tucked beneath them, shoulders draped in furs or heavy cloth, eyes already half-lidded in anticipation. You're handed a small clay cup filled with a warm, bitter drink. Possibly something fermented. Possibly just extremely overboiled moss tea. You sip and pretend it's delicious. It tastes like commitment. Tonight's storyteller is an older man with eyebrows that could shelter squirrels. He clears his throat and begins without preamble. The tale. A lengthy, wandering saga about a man who married a river spirit and spent the rest of his life trying to build her a waterproof bed. Every time he thought he'd succeeded, she'd dissolve slightly in the night. Eventually, he settled for sleeping beside a puddle. They were reportedly very happy. You glance around and realize that several people are already nodding off. Not rudely, not even accidentally. This is part of it. The story is both entertainment and lullaby, gently meandering without a rush to reach the end. If it does end. Some stories don't. They just pause indefinitely, like a playlist that runs out of songs but never stops spinning. You wonder how many of these tales are factual, how many exaggerated, how many metaphors wrapped in folk wisdom. Historians still argue whether the Ainu's narrative traditions were codified oral histories or improvised memory games. Probably both. And maybe that's the point. As the storyteller hums a tune between chapters, you feel your eyelids grow heavy. You lean back slightly, cushioned by a rolled-up robe. Someone drapes a second robe over your legs without asking. The warmth is instant and oddly emotional. In the low flicker of the firelight, the lines between waking and sleeping blur again. Ainu sleep isn't a break from life. It's a part of it. A sacred intermission. A time when you're not just resting your body, but allowing your soul to wander, to listen, to make friends with dream foxes or river brides or acorn-hoarding deities. And as you drift, you swear you hear the forest laugh. The fire still crackles low, casting long, gentle shadows across the woven mats and wooden beams. Someone snores softly in the far corner, just one elongated exhale, like a ghost sighing its way out of a gourd. The storyteller doesn't seem bothered. He pauses, then resumes his tale as if speaking to both the waking and the half-asleep. You blink slowly. Not because you're tired, though you definitely are, but because even blinking feels like part of the rhythm now. Life here is measured in gestures and glances. It's not rushed. And sleep, as you're learning, is threaded into everything like moss into the bark of an old tree. As dawn edges toward the sky, soft and deliberate, you find yourself ushered out of the house by a gentle nudge and a murmured invitation. Another nap. Not quite. Today, you're going to learn how dreams are interpreted by the Ainu, not as fleeting nonsense, but as actual actionable messages. You know, like cryptic emails from the universe with no unsubscribe button. You're led to a small garden plot behind one of the larger homes, where a woman kneels over rows of herbs and odd-looking root vegetables. She greets you with a look that says, "Yes, I know you drooled during the story circle," but she doesn't bring it up, bless her. Instead, she offers you a gourd of water and pats the ground beside her. You sit. She begins to speak, not loudly, not hurriedly. More like she's chewing the words and feeding them to you one by one. Dreams, in the Ainu view, are not frivolous. They are not figments. They're travel. When you dream, you go somewhere real. Maybe not real like this dirt beneath your feet, but real in the way a memory is real, or a feeling you can't explain. Ainu elders, particularly women, often served as dream interpreters. Not because they had some divine hotline, though one crone allegedly talked to a trout spirit for advice, but because they paid attention. That's all. They listened. They remembered patterns. They knew which images meant warning and which ones meant eat more seaweed. You mention a dream you had last night, something about a giant bird scolding you for wearing mismatched socks. She raises an eyebrow and taps the ground thoughtfully. That bird is your better self, she says, deadpan. It wants you to dress with dignity. You consider it. Fair enough. She tells you that some dreams arrive before events, some after. A dream may echo a thing you've already lived but haven't fully understood. And some dreams are dreams within dreams, sneaky little things meant to test if you're paying attention. Historians still argue whether these interpretations were based in shamanistic ritual or psychological insight, or if the Ainu just liked making people think twice about their subconscious pizza cravings. It could be all of the above. The garden around you hums with morning life. Insects float lazily from leaf to leaf, like tiny airships navigating a green city. The woman points out a plant whose root, when steeped in hot water, is said to invite more vivid dreams. Too much, though, she warns, and you'll dream the same dream over and over until it gets bored of you. You're not sure if she's joking. You help her gather herbs, slipping them into a pouch made of tightly woven bark. The act feels meditative, hypnotic, like pre-sleep in motion. When you ask how they prepare for sleep during times of trouble, sickness, famine, grief, she nods solemnly and reaches for a long strand of dried seaweed hanging nearby. Turns out, the Ainu have lullabies. Not just for babies. Grown-ups get lullabies too, though they're more like chants, repetitive, rhythm-heavy songs sung in a near whisper, sometimes to others, sometimes just to oneself. You try to hum along as she demonstrates. It's strangely soothing, even though you have no idea what you're humming about. Could be a rice harvest. Could be an apology to a bear. Later that evening, after another communal meal involving something that tastes like fish but has the texture of pickled tofu, the dream interpreter leads you to the edge of the forest. Tonight, she says, we sleep closer to the spirits. You nod like this is totally normal. A sleeping mat is already laid out on the mossy earth, woven from reeds and stuffed with dry leaves. A blanket, heavier than expected, waits at its foot. As you settle in, she sprinkles something fragrant over your head. It smells like mint and old smoke. Possibly pine needle dust. Possibly dream accelerant. Hopefully not cayenne pepper. You lie there, staring up through the trees at a patch of sky still clinging to twilight. Crickets tune up in the underbrush. A distant owl calls out like it's rehearsing for a solo. And then you breathe. Sleep arrives slowly, like a polite guest who removes their shoes at the door and lingers awkwardly before sitting down. And just before you fall into it completely, the woman leans down and whispers, "Listen to the first thing you hear when you wake. That is your dream's true ending." When you stir again, hours later, the forest is thick with fog. You blink at the canopy above. Something rustles. Something calls. And in the quiet, you hear it. Not a voice, not a sound exactly, but the sudden awareness of your own breath, soft and rhythmic. Steady. Present. You sit up slowly, unsure if you dreamed at all. But you feel rested. Not just rested. Aligned. Later, sipping something warm and suspiciously seaweed-flavored back in the village, you describe what you experienced. The woman smiles. That, she says, was a message without words. The best kind. And just like that, the day begins again. Another round of cooking, mending, storytelling, and preparing for the next voyage across the invisible bridge between waking and sleep. By now, you've settled into a rhythm, a kind of cultural osmosis where you absorb customs just by breathing them in. No alarms, no coffee-fueled panic, no news cycle dragging you out of bed with dread. Just birds, firewood, and the occasional half-joking warning about bear spirits. Honestly, you could get used to this. Today you're heading out to meet an elder known for his intricate knowledge of seasonal rituals, especially those marking the transitions between wakefulness and rest. You're told his house is shaped slightly differently from the others. Apparently, he insisted on a roof that curved like a fox's tail. For luck and breeze, someone says. Or maybe just style points. When you arrive, He's already waiting outside, whittling a small figurine of a sleeping deer. He doesn't look up, just gestures to the spot beside him with the kind of gravity that says, "Sit or I'll tell a story so long your grandchildren will be born mid-chapter." So you sit. The conversation begins in spirals, like smoke drifting through pine boughs. He talks about seasons, but not just spring, summer, autumn, and winter. The Ainu recognized a more nuanced calendar based on food cycles, migrations, and, you guessed it, dream rhythms. You learn that people slept differently in different seasons. In summer, the heat made midday naps common, especially for elders. In winter, sleep expanded like a bear's belly, long nights punctuated by gentle activity and whispered myths. Sleep, the elder says, is how we greet the cold, like bowing to a snowstorm. He chuckles as he describes the tradition of winter dream bundles, pouches sewn from fox fur or salmon skin, filled with bits of fragrant moss, beads, and sometimes tiny bones from animals considered protective. These bundles were placed beside pillows, more like bundled straw rolls, to invite certain dreams and repel others. Sort of like aromatherapy meets antique emoji. Historians still argue whether the bones were symbolic, medicinal, or just an elaborate excuse to keep leftovers under your head. Either way, the Ainu believed dreams during solstice nights held extra meaning. More potent, more predictive, more layered in metaphors even Freud would have backed away from slowly. You mentioned that where you come from, people sometimes set intentions before bed. The elder raises an eyebrow, amused. We don't tell sleep what to do, he says. We ask it nicely. The idea of asking sleep becomes a running joke between the two of you as the day progresses. You help him gather wood and observe his methods of seasoning bark strips that are later burned during twilight, not for heat, but for scent. Apparently, the smell of slow-burning oak mixed with deer fat tells the spirit world you're open to messages. Hopefully not about overdue chores. As twilight dips into evening, he shows you his sleeping nook. No walls, just a raised platform near the hearth, covered with layers of stitched hide and woven reeds. This, he says, gesturing grandly, is my palace of unconscious wisdom. You admit it looks incredibly cozy for a royal court. He teaches you the twilight chant, a humming pattern meant to slow the heart and mind before bed. No words, just vibrations. You hum along, feeling the way the sound gently rearranges your thoughts like someone tidying a cluttered desk. Before you lie down, he passes you one of his dream bundles. Try it, he says. Maybe it'll show you a past life as a sleepy otter. You're not sure if he's joking, but honestly, that sounds kind of amazing. That night, the fire is banked low, and the house sighs around you like a tired lung. You curl under the blanket, holding the bundle to your chest like a sleepy treasure. Your mind floats just above the line between here and elsewhere, suspended in that perfect moment before dreams sneak in wearing masks and old shoes. And when the dreams arrive, they are vivid. You are walking barefoot through snow that doesn't melt, under stars that blink like tired fireflies. A fox follows you, not menacing, just curious. You glance back and it nods, as if saying, "Yes, you're exactly where you should be." When you wake, the elder is already stirring porridge with a carved spoon shaped like a bear's paw. He nods once, no questions asked, and passes you a bowl. You take a bite. It tastes faintly of smoke and sweetness. Possibly pine nuts. Possibly magic. Later that morning, you join the community for a quiet walk to a nearby stream. It's part of a weekly cleansing tradition, not just for the body, but for sleep itself. People wade in, splash cold water over their faces, and thank the river for carrying away bad dreams. You do the same. The water is cold but invigorating, like waking up inside a poem. On the way back, you find yourself humming the twilight chant without thinking. The elder smiles at you knowingly. It's in you now, he says, like moss in the bark. That evening, you carve your own miniature dream bundle, awkward, lumpy, and deeply beloved. The elder nods in approval. Not bad, he says. You might only have confusing dreams about talking salmon now. You laugh, but deep down you hope he's right. The next morning begins with rain, steady, quiet, non-negotiable. Not a storm, but the sort of gentle drizzle that suggests the sky just remembered something sad and isn't ready to talk about it yet. You stay in, warming your hands over the hearth while steam curls from a pot of cedar-infused water. It smells like camping and mint tea had a shy baby. Around you, the house is alive with little creaks, as though it, too, is stretching after a dream. Your host, the elder, is busy repairing a rain cloak made of woven bark fibers. He tells you that on days like this, the Ainu were not idle. Rain was sacred. It softened the earth and slowed the body, giving people permission to tend to the slow rituals, storytelling, embroidery, mending, and sometimes, dream work. Today's focus, he says, will be on interpreting your dreams. You pause mid-sip of cedar water. Even the salmon, you ask. Especially the salmon, he grins. He explains that for the Ainu, dreams were not just nightly brain static. They were considered kamwanomi, messages from the spiritual world. Not every dream had meaning, of course, but recurring dreams, unusual symbols, dreams that refused to be forgotten, those got attention. You sit beside him with your carved, slightly off-center dream bundle, while he produces a cloth covered in painted symbols. A river, a hawk, a spiral, what might be a raccoon giving side eye. He points to each one, explaining common interpretations. A river might mean change or continuity. A hawk could signal an approaching visitor, or an obligation you're trying to dodge. The spiral depends on the direction. Historians still argue whether Ainu dream symbology was consistent across all clans, or if each community evolved its own dreamy dialect. The truth is probably a bit of both, regional core ideas, personalized by individual traditions. The elder insists that the salmon dream is auspicious. Salmon come home, he says. So if you dream of them, something or someone might be returning. You nod solemnly, though you're still not sure if it was a salmon or a particularly moody sardine. As the rain intensifies, others from the village stop by. They bring food, wool, and of course, stories. One woman, with hair braided like river channels, shares her recurring dream of a canoe floating backward upstream, full of sleeping dogs. The elder rubs his chin. That, he says, is either a warning, or the dogs are in charge now. Everyone laughs. The story morphs into a playful argument about dog spirits and whether they make good guides or just eat all your dream food. What strikes you is how dream sharing here isn't mystical or awkward, it's communal. Like passing around a pot of stew. People weigh in, offer thoughts, even act them out. One man mimics a dream snake with such flair you almost expect him to shed his tunic right there. He doesn't, thankfully. PG-13. Remember, as the day unfolds, the rain softens to a mist. The air smells cleaner somehow, like the world pressed refresh. You're invited to help prepare a small offering to the Kamui, the spirits that live in and around everything. Tonight, the focus is on the Kamui of sleep, a lesser-known but deeply respected figure. No one has seen it, of course, but it's described as something like a cross between a crane, a cat, and a billowy cloud. Very elusive. Very sleepy. The offering is simple. Warm porridge, a carved feather, and a whisper of gratitude. It's placed near the fire, with an open palm gesture that translates loosely to, "Thanks for not giving me dreams about falling off cliffs or showing up to hunt in my underwear." You help prepare it, feeling oddly touched. In your world, sleep is often treated like a utility, a thing to be hacked, optimized, tracked. Here, it's more like a friend you hope will visit, bringing gifts if it's in the mood. That evening, as the village settles into its blanket of fog, someone begins to drum softly. Not a performance, just a heartbeat to carry the night. You lie on your mat, dream bundle near your head, and try to remember the exact rhythm. Maybe it'll sync with your pulse. Sleep comes gently. In your dream, you're walking along the river again, but this time the fox walks beside you, and the salmon swim through the air like lanterns. You ask them where they're going, and they say, "Back to where the rain is born." When you wake, you're smiling. There's a quiet certainty in your bones, as if a puzzle piece inside you has finally snapped into place. Later, the elder nods, unsurprised. "That dream," he says, "means you're ready." Ready for what? To stop needing answers. You both laugh at that. But deep down, you know what he means. You rise slowly, stretching beneath the faint weight of your blanket. The morning air is cool but no longer damp, just crisp enough to make your breath a visible wisp, like a secret rising skyward. Outside, the clouds have cleared, revealing a palette of blues and greens that shimmer like the inside of a seashell. There's a buzz of activity in the village today. It's the start of a seasonal rhythm, the ceremonial turning of sleeping mats, an Ainu tradition that seems, at first glance, profoundly uneventful. But as you quickly learn, even the simplest acts are woven with meaning. Your host shows you how each sleeping mat is carefully rolled, aired out, and then laid in the opposite direction. It's not just about freshness, though that's a bonus. No, this ritual aligns sleeping bodies with seasonal flows, wind, river currents, and even the paths of migrating birds. Why does it matter which way your head points? You ask, half joking. The elder smirks. Do you want your dreams tangled like fishnets? Fair point. There's a belief here that orientation affects dream clarity. Head pointed west. You might dream of your ancestors. Face east, and you're courting visions of the spirit world. North. That's for the particularly brave, or particularly foolish. Historians still argue whether these directions were universal or based on individual clan myths. Either way, you don't want to mess up and accidentally summon a dream bear before bedtime. You help a woman roll her mat. It's covered in tiny symbols, embroidered stars, curling waves, a fish with unusually large lips. She tells you it was a gift from her mother and that the fish is just for laughs. You can't help but smile. Later, you gather with a group preparing traditional pillows. These are not the plush, overstuffed rectangles you're used to. Instead, they're small wooden headrests, sometimes carved with patterns or wrapped in woven grass. They're not as uncomfortable as they sound, if you lie just right. The idea isn't to sink into softness, but to cradle your skull in alignment with the earth. You give one a test drive. It's different, like sleeping with your head balanced on an antique soap dish, but oddly dignified. Doesn't your neck hurt? You ask. A younger man shrugs. Sometimes. But dreams come faster this way. They don't get lost in too much softness. You nod thoughtfully, rubbing your own neck, already a little sore from modern mattresses and their deceptive luxury. As you walk through the village, you notice each home has a slightly different layout of sleeping space. Some sleep near the fire pit. Others have raised platforms lined with animal hides. One family sleeps in a circle, feet toward the center. They say it's for warmth and unity, but also to confuse evil spirits. They can't decide who to haunt, the father explains, grinning. You love how humor is quietly tucked into every explanation here. Like a wink from history, reminding you not to take anything, least of all sleep customs, too seriously. Mid-afternoon, you're invited to a quiet ceremony called Nukaroro. It's not flashy. No drums or chants. Just a simple act of blessing the sleeping space with cedar smoke and whispered intentions. Children are encouraged to place tiny charms beneath their pillows, a feather, a carved bead, a berry. It's all about gently suggesting what kind of dreams they'd like to have. You're handed a charm of your own, a smoothed pebble with a crescent carved into it. For calm seas, your host says. You tuck it into your sleeve, unsure if it's meant for dreaming or boating. Either way, you're honored. The rest of the evening flows like a lullaby. Dinner is quiet, a soft stew, a few roasted chestnuts, and a tea made from roasted grains that smells like burnt toast but tastes like sleep itself. It's warm, earthy, and just bitter enough to reset your senses. As night falls, there's a story shared around the fire, a tale of the Itak Kamui, the spirit of speech. It's said that this Kamui occasionally visits sleepers who forget how to express themselves in waking life. The spirit slips into their dreams, offering riddles and puzzles that, if solved, restore clarity and voice. You glance at the woman beside you. So, sort of like dream therapy? She laughs. Yes, but better dressed. That night, as you lie on your newly rotated mat with your neck precariously balanced on a wooden headrest, you think about all the little decisions that go into a night's sleep here. The direction you face, the smoke in the air, the charm under your pillow, the idea that sleep isn't something you fall into, but something you prepare for, welcome, and share. And just as your eyelids begin to flutter shut, you remember to whisper your wish to the Kamui of sleep. It's a simple one, let the fish dream of me too. You wake slowly, and for a moment, you're not sure where you are. The smell of wood smoke lingers faintly, and your neck has that stiff, but oddly satisfying ache that comes from sleeping the Ainu way, balanced, grounded, perhaps slightly concussed. Outside, the dawn is already warming the treetops. There's a hush to everything, like the whole village is holding its breath. But you're quickly reminded that sleep customs here aren't just about night. Midday sleep, short naps, dream recollection, all these weave into the rhythm of the day. You follow the low murmur of voices to a small clearing where an older woman is teaching children how to catch dreams. Not with nets or pillows, but with memory. They sit in a circle, eyes closed, retelling their dreams from the night before, what they saw, what they felt, what the dream smoke whispered in their ears. Some scholars believe these sessions doubled as early mental health practices, a way to process emotions, especially for children. Others argue they were more spiritual than psychological. Then again, the Ainu probably didn't draw such a hard line between the two. It's all dreams, after all. You listen as a boy describes being chased by a fox who spoke in riddles. The group nods solemnly. The woman gently prods, "What did the fox want you to learn?" It's not about solving the dream. It's about respecting it. You're invited to share, and though your dream was mostly about trying to eat soup with a wooden pillow, you tell it anyway. No one laughs. Instead, the woman nods and says, "Your spirit's hungry for rest." You consider trademarking that for a t-shirt. Later, someone brings up an old belief, that dreams left unspoken will sour the rice. You're not sure if it's metaphor or food safety advice, but you're now committed to oversharing your subconscious from here on out. After breakfast, a humble mix of rice, salted fish, and mountain vegetables, you're shown the family dream log. It's not a diary in the Western sense. It's more like a tapestry of symbols scratched into birch bark or sometimes inked into animal hide. Each mark corresponds to a dream theme: flying, hunting, floods, talking bears. You notice that talking bears appears more often than you'd expect. Your guide explains how the Ainu considered dream patterns to be predictive, not of fortune necessarily, but of changes in mood, behavior, or even weather. If 3 people dreamt of fire in the same week, it was time to reinforce the hearth. If someone dreamt of too many birds, it might mean visitors were coming. Or maybe just indigestion, you offer. The guide smiles politely, but you suspect you've just insulted someone's grandmother's spirit animal. There's a quiet reverence around dreaming here, but it's never heavy. The Ainu way seems to embrace dreams as both sacred and practical. They don't need to be big or heroic. A dream about fishing could just mean you miss your cousin, or that your net has a hole. What's striking is the communal nature of it all. Sleep isn't an escape from the world, it's a softer doorway into it. And the line between sleep and waking, spirit and body, is much thinner than you're used to. As afternoon rolls on, you visit a recluse at the edge of the village, a dream interpreter of some repute. Her home is quiet, with bundles of herbs hanging from the rafters and a bed so low to the ground it looks like she might actually be trying to sleep inside the earth. She doesn't speak at first. Instead, she hands you a carved stick and gestures for you to sit. You do, and she slowly begins rubbing tree resin into the wood, muttering to herself. Then she asks you to describe the last dream you remember vividly, not just the plot, but how it felt. You tell her about the dream you had years ago, the one where you were floating through a river made of feathers. She nods, closes her eyes, and says simply, "You're afraid of forgetting your softness." You blink. She's not wrong. Some Ainu believe dream symbols aren't fixed. They shift with seasons, age, and emotion. What a river means to a child may be different than to a hunter. Historians still debate whether these interpretations followed shared codes or were left entirely to individual shamans. Either way, there's a refreshing fluidity here. Your dreams are never wrong, just waiting to be translated. Before you leave, she hands you the carved stick. It has a spiral etched near one end. Use it to stir smoke, she says, or soup or thought. That night, you return to your sleeping mat, head still buzzing with the weight of feather rivers and soup sticks. There's a soft rain now, tapping against the roof. You clutch your dream charm and wonder what it might whisper back. And just before sleep takes you, you remember the kids around the dream circle, eyes shut, fishing in their memories. So you cast your own line out too, just to see what swims up. You wake to the sound of soft humming. It's the kind of hum that doesn't demand attention. More like it's been going on for centuries and you've just now noticed. Outside the dwelling, the air is thick with morning mist, curling lazily between trees like it's trying not to disturb anyone's sleep. The hum, you realize, is coming from an elder sitting by the fire, carefully spinning fibers from the bark of elm into something between thread and spell. You shuffle out quietly, still wrapped in the haze of dreams and dream interpretation and probably a little too much rice. She smiles without pausing her work and tells you today is a restful work day. You raise an eyebrow. She explains, it's a day for tasks that allow your body to move while your spirit naps. Apparently, the Ainu made space for this sort of waking rest, times when chores like weaving, carving, or mending were done in silence or gentle conversation, not as burdens, but as sleep's daylight cousins. Like the body didn't need to be fully alert to be useful, and the soul could stretch its legs without clocking out entirely. You're handed a bundle of reeds and shown how to tie them into a mat, fingers looping through ancient muscle memory that isn't yours but feels like it could be. You fall into the rhythm, slow and unhurried, and for a while, it feels like you're half awake inside someone else's afternoon. Nearby, someone starts singing. Not a song, exactly. More like a repeated set of syllables that rise and fall like waves. These yukur, epic chants passed down generations, were often sung during times of weaving or resting. Some lasted hours. You ask what this one means, and the weaver replies, it's about a fox who steals a god's slippers. You nod solemnly. Naturally. Scholars still debate whether the yukur were more entertainment or instruction. Did they encode laws or lullabies? Were they myth, memory, or medicine? Probably yes. By late morning, you're introduced to a curious custom, the mid-meal nap. This isn't the post-feast coma you're used to. It's more deliberate. A short nap, often 10 to 15 minutes, taken right after food, but before fully cleaning up. Something about trapping the warmth of the meal and giving your digestion a head start. You try it. You sit cross-legged, breathe deeply, and rest your chin in your hands. It works disturbingly well. You dream of noodle spirits and fish who argue about cooking techniques. When you blink awake, you find someone's left a steaming cup of pine needle tea beside you. You sip it slowly, vaguely convinced it's infused with forest wisdom. Or maybe caffeine. Hard to tell. In the afternoon, you join a small group heading toward the forest edge. Today, they're gathering herbs and moss for bedding. Not because they're low on stock, but because changing sleep materials is seen as a spiritual refresh, like airing out your dreams. The Ainu believed that overused mats could dull the mind and attract restless spirits. You collect soft moss, pleasantly dry thanks to some ancient trick involving bark layers and timing. The scent is earthy, faintly citrusy, and very likely to be stolen by future essential oil companies. Someone tells you about a tradition where sleep spaces are temporarily relocated during significant life events, births, deaths, seasonal changes. Not because the space is cursed, but because the energy needs reshuffling, like the village's internal feng shui. It's called Ito Karpa, and while it has no direct English equivalent, you understand it intuitively. Sometimes, even your sleep wants a change of scenery. That night, you lie on freshly gathered bedding. It crackles faintly, like a soft applause. The hut is quiet except for the shifting logs in the fire pit and the wind playing tag with the chimney smoke. You recall something else you heard earlier, that some Ainu believed sleep should not be symmetrical. That is, one should always fall asleep with the body at a slight diagonal, never lined up perfectly with the walls or hearth. A way to confuse malevolent spirits or perhaps to encourage less linear dreams. You shift slightly, just in case. Your thoughts start to drift. You wonder about the patterns in the woven mats, if they represent stories, seasons, or maybe secret nap rankings. You remember the fox chant, the elm thread hum, the feather river dream. And as sleep pulls you under, you realize something funny. In a world obsessed with productivity, here's a culture that made rest not just acceptable, but intentional. Sleep was woven into life with care, humor, and deep, mossy reverence. You smile in the dark, and let it all go. You wake to the scent of smoked fish and something sweet, berries maybe, or some forest fruit that doesn't have an English name. The sky outside is a slow blue, like it's not entirely convinced about becoming morning just yet. Someone hands you a bowl, warm to the touch, filled with a soft porridge made from millet and something akin to walnut butter. You eat slowly, your senses still half asleep. Today is a storytelling day, which, it turns out, is also a kind of resting. In the Ainu world, storytelling wasn't a nighttime novelty or something saved for children. It was a core part of community life, a medium where the everyday and the divine were constantly elbowing each other for space. The stories were passed along like heirlooms, recited around the fire, and often under blankets.
Why?
Because the spirits might be eavesdropping, and blankets confused them. Obviously. So, you're invited into a long, low hut where heavy fabric muffles both wind and whisper. The fire is subdued, just enough to keep the chill from biting. And then the stories begin. The storyteller's voice isn't loud, but it doesn't need to be. Each word is like a stone dropped into still water. You follow tales of bears that walk like men, rivers that punish liars, and owls who mediate divine family squabbles. The rhythm lulls you into a half-dreaming state, where images slide in and out of your mind's eye with the softness of feathers. One story sticks with you. It's about a spirit who watches over sleepers. If you snore, he leaves. If you talk in your sleep, he sighs and marks your dreams for review. But if you sleep in absolute silence, mouth closed, limbs still, he slips inside your dream and offers helpful advice. Like where to find rare mushrooms, or which neighbors to avoid. Historians still argue whether these stories were believed literally, or whether they served as metaphorical sleep hygiene. Either way, you're definitely going to try silent sleeping tonight. Just in case. The storyteller also describes the way certain tales could only be told in winter, or only after a snowfall. Something about seasonal permission. When the world goes white, the rules bend. You can speak of gods and ghosts without offending them, because snow makes them drowsy. You chuckle quietly, picturing a sleepy storm spirit tucked under a glacier with a mug of pine-scented tea. Someone passes around strips of dried salmon, chewy and rich. Another person hands you a tiny carved charm made of antler. It's shaped like a bear paw. To catch good dreams, they say with a wink. You tuck it into your sash, wondering if customs officials are going to have questions later. You spend the afternoon walking through a pine forest. The ground is carpeted in needles and patches of moss, like nature's own memory foam. You're shown trees that lean in a certain direction, natural compasses used for navigation long before maps, but also said to point toward places where dreams gather. It's here you learn about the Ainu, little ritual wood shavings tied to sacred trees or stuck into the ground. They look like curled ribbons, shaved from willow or birch. Though mostly used in ceremonies, some are placed near sleeping areas, intended to curry favor with the kamui, divine beings who might visit in your dreams. You try carving one, your fingers clumsy but determined. The resulting spiral is, well, let's say abstract. You plant it by a mossy root and whisper a half apology to whatever spirit might stumble across it. As twilight bleeds into the forest, you're told something else. Many Ainu believed in rotating rest. If someone in the household felt spiritually unbalanced, they'd sleep in a different place each night for a cycle of days, sometimes clockwise around the room, other times in relation to the moon phase. This wandering sleep was said to shake loose dark thoughts and remind the soul to stay flexible. It's comforting, you think. The idea that rest isn't just stillness, but movement too. A gentle dance between here and there, comfort and curiosity. That night, you're invited to sleep in the storytelling hut. The blankets smell of cedar and wood smoke. As you lie down, someone mutters a short chant, just 4 or 5 syllables. A blessing, or maybe a bedtime joke. Hard to tell. The fire dims. The silence thickens. And before your thoughts scatter too far, you remember the advice of the sleep spirit. Stay still, stay silent. Maybe he'll visit. And maybe he'll tell you where to find those mushrooms. By now, you've learned to wake slowly, letting the sound of rustling branches and distant bird calls filter through your sleep like the last drips of a dream. This morning, it's especially quiet. One of those mornings that feels padded, muffled by fog or the soft hush of freshly fallen snow. You sit up slowly, the heavy blanket sliding off your shoulders. The air nips at your skin, but it's not unfriendly. It just wants your attention. You stretch, your back cracking slightly, and realize your little carved bear paw charm is still tucked into your sash. It's warm, somehow. Maybe from your body heat. Or maybe it worked. Today, someone suggests you learn about sickness and healing, or more specifically, the Ainu approach to rest when the body isn't at its best. You follow a narrow trail through ferns and low bamboo to a smaller hut tucked beside a river. This one smells strongly of herbs, fish fat, and something sharp, pine resin maybe. Inside, a healer waits. She's neither young nor particularly old, but has the kind of face that makes you want to confess your bad posture and every snack you've ever had after midnight. She speaks softly and gestures for you to sit on a woven mat. The first thing you notice is the layering. Furs over reeds, reeds over grass, grass over packed dirt. It's as if the entire floor is one big cradle. She explains that rest is layered too. Physical rest, yes, but also social rest. That's why the sick are often kept company here. Someone always nearby, but never loud. Presence without pressure. She shows you a bundle of herbs hung from the ceiling. Yamogi, a kind of mugwort. It's used to induce sweating and chase away fevers. You sniff it, trying not to sneeze. It smells like a medieval apothecary crossed with a salad bar. A smudge of it is burned in a small ceramic dish, the smoke curling up like a spirit late for its appointment. Ainu healing wasn't about domination. No, kill the virus mindset. More like negotiation. Inviting the body to heal, coaxing the ailment to leave. One method involved warm stones tucked near the ribs or lower back during sleep, radiating heat and encouraging the spirit to linger in the body, not drift too far into dream territory. Because apparently, when you're ill, your spirit gets itchy. Wanders. Needs reminders to stick around. Historians still argue whether these rituals had physiological benefits or were purely symbolic. But honestly, you've seen enough to know that sometimes symbolism works better than science, especially when you're exhausted and just want someone to sing to your spleen. There's a bowl of soup. Cloudy, warm, with floating bits of root vegetable and tiny river fish. You sip it while curled in a corner, watching as a mother brings in her sleepy child, who's got a runny nose and a stuffed hedgehog made of straw. She tucks him in, placing 3 inao beside his little head. One for healing, one for protection, and, according to the giggling teen nearby, one to make sure he doesn't wet the bed. It turns out, healing here is holistic in the sleepiest possible way. Stories are told while the ill rest. Songs are hummed, not loud enough to disturb, just loud enough to anchor the dreamer in the room. There are even lullabies for feverish minds. You hear one, sung in a language with more breath than consonant. It goes on for several minutes and mentions both salmon bones and moonlight, though you suspect something's been lost in translation. You're invited to lie down again, just to try it, they say. The mat is warm, the herbs smoke faint now, and the soup still coating your belly with quiet comfort. You close your eyes. Here, sleep is part of the prescription. Not just get some rest, but the rest itself is the medicine. When someone is very ill, they are surrounded with soft things, gentle sounds, and hands that offer warmth but never insist on conversation. In this way, the soul is coaxed back from wherever it's wandered, led home not with a leash but with a lullaby. There's even a belief, you're told later, that bad dreams can pull illness into the body. So to prevent that, the community sometimes assigns dream guardians, usually older siblings or favorite uncles, who sleep nearby and tell a good dream in the morning, like a vaccine. Tonight, you'll be someone's dream guardian. A small honor. You're warned not to snore too much. As the day winds down, you help clean some fish for drying. The knife is dull, but your host claims that's on purpose. Sharp things attract sharp dreams, he mutters, then shrugs. Probably nonsense. But you do notice that everyone's knives are old and worn, like they've been shaving spirit ribbons and peeling stubborn metaphors off bark for generations. Later, a soft rain begins to tap the roof. The healer gives you a small pouch of dried yamogi to place under your blanket. If you dream of frogs, that's normal, she says with the straightest face you've ever seen. As you lie down, your blanket tucked up to your ears, you think about how different the Ainu approach to rest feels. Not passive, not indulgent, but purposeful. Sacred. Like a pact between your body and the forest. I'll rest if you watch over me. You close your eyes to the soft hiss of rain, the faded scent of herbs, and the low rumble of someone humming 2 huts over. The hedgehog kid is already snoring. Your shift as dream guardian begins. You wake slowly, the kind of slow where dreams still cling to your eyelashes. The hedgehog kid is gone, up with the sun, chasing after breakfast or butterflies, and your shift as dream guardian ends with no reported nightmares. A small victory. Someone hands you a warm bowl of rice porridge, flecked with something that might be dried plum or fish. Either way, it's salty sweet and oddly perfect. As you eat, your host leans over and whispers, "Today, you learn about sleeping with bears. You choke a little on the porridge. Not literally, they add, patting your back. Mostly. You're led deeper into the forest to a larger structure, almost like a shrine, with bundles of sticks leaning against its sides and an odd, musky smell clinging to the air. A bear skull, bleached and decorated with red ochre, hangs over the entryway like a very judgmental welcome sign. This is where you learn about Ayamant, the bear sending ceremony. And no, it's not strictly a sleep ritual, but it's deeply connected to rest, spirits, and the boundary between waking and dreaming. See, in traditional Ainu belief, bears weren't just animals. They were gods visiting in fuzzy disguise. And when a bear was killed for the community, it wasn't done in secrecy or haste. It was ceremonial, respectful, and often involved long periods of song, prayer, and yes, sleep. You sit beside the hearth as someone explains. Sometimes, a bear cub would be raised by a family, nursed, fed, even tucked into warm bedding like one of their own children. It lived indoors, among them. When the time came for its spirit to be sent back, it was done with chants and offerings, and often, everyone in the village would sleep nearby in a kind of shared vigil. They tell you, sleep during Ayamant was a bridge. It allowed villagers to join the god bear in dream, to walk it back to the spirit world with lullabies and smoked salmon. It's all very strange and beautiful. Historians still argue whether the ceremony was more spiritual or practical. Was it religious devotion or just a culturally cushioned form of livestock raising? But here, no one seems to mind the ambiguity. They just hum softly as they brush ash from the bear skull's hollow eyes. Later, you're invited to lie down on a woven mat in the same space. The fire is burning low, and someone sprinkles cedar needles on it, making the air smell sharp and green. You're told to dream of the bear's return journey. Just that. No pressure. And you do dream, of paws so large they leave prints in clouds, of rivers that laugh when stepped in, of thick fur brushing past you like a breeze made of memory. You wake hours later with the sense that something sacred has stepped quietly through you. In the afternoon, your host teaches you a lullaby once sung to bear cubs. It doesn't rhyme, not in any way you'd recognize. It drifts more than it lands, describing the moonlight on river stones and how salmon flash silver in your dreams. You hum it quietly, barely aware of yourself doing it, as you help carve tiny Ainu sticks later by the fire. Someone mentions that these bear-related sleep traditions have largely faded now, surviving in museum displays and stories passed down in kitchens. But others insist they still happen, quietly, in remote villages where the stars are clear and old songs aren't forgotten. You nod, listening to the conversation like it's a lullaby itself. Whether literal or metaphorical, the idea of sleeping beside a divine bear is oddly comforting. You think about how strange it would be to nurse a bear cub, to lull it to sleep with songs about the river, knowing one day you'll send it back to its otherworldly home. Your blanket that night is heavier than usual, as if it remembers the bear too. You lie there, eyes open to the soft glow of the hearth, and think about the blurred line between human and spirit in Ainu stories. How easily people drift into animal roles and animals into human ones. Maybe that's why their sleep customs feel so rich. Because for the Ainu, dreams weren't just personal, they were shared, stitched into the story of the whole village. Sleep wasn't escape, it was participation. And bears, well, they were just the biggest, furriest bedtime guests of all. As you drift off again, you imagine yourself wrapped in fur, not as a costume but as a welcome. And somewhere far off, you hear the echo of a lullaby about salmon, stars, and walking home to a place you've never been. Your final morning arrives with the scent of crushed mugwort and old stories curling like smoke around the hearth. You stretch under a thick woven cover, every joint humming with a strange, sleepy satisfaction. It's not quite the feeling of waking up from a long nap. More like returning from a different version of yourself. No one says it, but you sense a change in the air. Today, your visit ends. But not before one last lesson, one that unravels sleep from the tangle of myth and daily life and leaves it lying bare, humble, human. You're led into a modest home, far smaller than the ceremonial lodges or winter guest huts you've grown used to. This is a widow's house. She's perhaps 70, though time has left her ageless. Her hands are busy carding dogbane fibers, but she gestures for you to sit, to listen. Her voice creaks like a willow in wind. She talks of dreams, not the spiritual ones offered up to bears or river spirits, but the quiet, private kind. Dreams that visit when your belly is full and the wind outside is soft and reasonable. She says dreams are like visitors. If you offer them warmth and patience, they stay. If you chase them or ask too much, they vanish. You ask her, what helps the dreams come? Her answers are tiny and beautiful, brushing the floor smooth with birch branches before bed, whispering good night to the hearth, tucking dried kelp in your sleeve for safety. Nothing grand. No bare skulls or sacred chants. Just small rituals that weave sleep into the everyday. You're handed a flat pillow stuffed with shavings from the bark of the viburnum tree. It smells like snow and rainwater. You lie back, and the widow places a thin cloth over your eyes. To keep your soul from wandering too far, she explains, almost teasing. You feel oddly grateful. The Ainu once believed that the soul, or ramat, could drift during sleep, sometimes far, sometimes dangerously so. That's why children were never allowed to sleep alone for long. A soul unanchored was a soul easily lost. And the best way to call it back? A soft voice murmuring your name until your breathing deepened again. Not yelling. Just presence. Historians still argue whether this belief in soul wandering was literal or metaphorical. Was it spiritual danger, or just an early diagnosis of sleepwalking, night terrors, or epilepsy? No one agrees. And maybe it doesn't matter, because the result was care, attention, company. Your host family shares stories of communal sleep, nights when everyone huddled together for warmth and safety. Grandparents, cousins, even guests. Sleep was social, breathable. The fire never went out, and someone was always half awake, murmuring to the hearth or feeding it twigs. Tonight, they invite you to join them in that tradition. No solo sleeping bag, no mosquito net bubble. Just soft mats and layers of woven cloth and the slow, shifting warmth of bodies breathing together. You settle in, surrounded on all sides by gentle snoring. No one says, good night. It just happens. Like the sun slipping into the sea. And just as your eyelids begin their downward drift, someone begins to hum, not a lullaby this time, but something wordless. A tune made of breath and memory. It's not meant to put you to sleep. It's meant to keep you company while you go. The room smells of cedar smoke, fish oil, and old stories. You realize this is how the Ainu dream, softly, together, anchored by breath and rhythm and the quiet faith that souls, like people, always find their way home. The window is open just a crack, and through it, the night air slips in with the sigh of pine needles and the rustle of an owl changing perch. You're not sure when you fall asleep, but at some point you feel it, a tug at your soul like a soft thread reeling you gently, securely, inward. You dream of snow that tastes like honey, of rivers that laugh, of moss pillows and firelight, of voices that don't wake you, but wait with you. And when morning comes, you rise slowly, your soul still warm in your chest, as if it had never once wandered. So now, as you lie back in your own bed, or wherever you found yourself tonight, let the memory of that hearth stay with you. The way the fire cracked and whispered in the silence. The way breath rose and fell all around you like waves on the edge of sleep. Picture the old woman brushing the floor smooth for her dreams. The child humming quietly to keep the bare spirit calm. The careful way someone folded a bit of cloth over your eyes, not to block the world, but to keep your soul from drifting too far. Your own room might be filled with very different sounds. The hum of a fan, a distant car passing, the quiet buzz of electricity somewhere behind the wall. But beneath it all, let your breath slow, deep and even, like a song you don't have to remember. Maybe tonight, your dreams will walk with bears. Or maybe they'll just tiptoe through soft forests of memory, trailing leaves and laughter. Wherever they go, let them. There is no rush now. Nothing to solve, nothing to chase. You are warm, you are safe, and you are not alone. Even now, somewhere in the northern woods of Hokkaido, a fire crackles. A lullaby rises. And sleep comes gently, like snow on moss, quiet, soft, and certain. Close your eyes. The world will still be here when you wake.